And I never as a kid, I grew up I mean, my parents were all, I never would have considered I would ever agree with anything potentially conservative. It was always like the Democrats are the good guys. But something has shifted. Like, I mean, that's a whole kind of, and had Elon Musk not tweeted, perhaps it probably wouldn't have gone like viral. It's not that interesting, but these exchanges have taught me, and exchanges since on YouTube that seem like baseline intelligence people see as like something unusual.
Hey, Warren, welcome to the conversation. Appreciate you taking some time to speak with me today. I
Absolutely.
encountered your story for the first time when Elon reposted it, which I imagine is like probably how most people found out about you. It was the video that you had posted in your class of trying to walk your student through, from my point of view, critically thinking about the transphobic label that they had applied to J.K. Rowling. My personal opinion was that we don't do nearly enough to teach critical thinking in schools and to teach kids to think for themselves. So when I saw that video, I was immediately like, I got to talk to this guy. This is more of what we need in education. And then I think it was like 3 or 4 months later in May when you popped back up on my feed again, and the news was that you had got fired from your job. And I was just like, this is totally expected and also totally devastating. What I think is what we need more of is getting sort of like just pushed out of the system. Can you put yourself back in that frame of time and talk to me a little bit about what going through that felt like? And sort of we'll get into what your thoughts are on the education system right now.
But I mean, it sucked. So I don't really think about it anymore. Just try to like move on. And yeah, there's some people you just like, you don't want to waste the, the room in your brain. Like, it's not worth the brain frequency or whatever it is to get hung up on or even think about. So now and then, yeah, it creeps in. But I just really, that's how I think about it. I'm just like, it's not worth thinking about. So that's how I would answer that. I mean, I don't know.
You don't want to relive it, is what you're saying, really.
Not really. I mean, if you have anything specific, I'll, yeah.
No, we don't need to talk about the specifics of the falling out. If you'd rather skip by that, I think everyone can probably sort of imagine how you feel about that. But I am very interested in your take just on the system of education as
Mm.
it is right now. And, I mean, like from my point of view, it was really bad in the late 80s and 90s when I was going to school. And it seems like things are only getting worse, right? So you've been in the system, though.
Mm-hmm.
You could say a victim of the system, but I'm interested, yeah, what is it that you think just at large about the public education system specifically right now?
Well, we need to understand like high schools are trying to hit a target, and the target is higher education because they're worried about their metrics and their numbers as far as, okay, how many students are going to college? What are our test scores? And I think so. The real issue is higher education. Honestly, and the grounds are shifting as far as, do people really need higher education? There's a lot of dialogue around that, and I hope that people do start waking up because it's one of the few products that's increasing in its cost and decreasing in its value. It just doesn't make any sense. You're not able to ever escape those loans. It's so easy to qualify for those loans. It's just clearly it's an industry that's flawed. So, and as long as that the schools are kind of feeding into that industry, so I know that's not the real popular answer. It's not like a spicy answer, but I think that's where I see a lot of it. As far as politics and cognitive dissonance and everything, I mean, at the high school level, it exists and it's there. What I went through, honestly, I think it was more just there were components of that. There were definitely people that were frustrated or disagreed with me. And I think as I started trying to take that opportunity and turn it into something as far as like building a YouTube channel, I think there was definitely a divide that increased, and it definitely caused some difficulties. And I kind of knew my days were numbered. Anyways, I knew eventually something. I thought they were going to just not renew my contract over the summer, which is what they usually do. I mean, the principal and the assistant principal that hired me were fired the year before me, both on the same day in a very similar way in the middle of the day, no reason given. And they give some vague reason that they're allowed to do technically. If they're able to do it technically, they just do it. And when I say they, it's really like one person. It's not like most. It's anyways. I'm getting sidetracked with that. So it's an unusual environment that I was in. I was in a. I mean, let's dig into the flaws. I mean, but you just asked me another question. There's going to be flaws in it. I'd have to let me see what
No,
you think.
no, it's fine. It's understandable to sort of get lost in the details. Uh, Ultimately, though, what I would love to accomplish is to make things better, right? Like complaining about what's wrong doesn't necessarily make things better. It often will highlight some problems that we need to address or things like that. But getting into the specifics of exactly what happened at your school isn't probably applicable to everyone. I'm
Mm-hmm.
curious though, Warren, what got you into education? Let's sort of like step back a little bit and talk about your life, as a kid and maybe a young adult, and how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, my parents were both college professors, so I saw that lifestyle, and I thought it was really cool. Like my mom taught metals design, jewelry design at college level. My dad taught wood design, like woodworking. And so I always saw they always told me it's like the best job you can have is teaching. They didn't say high school, but so I was shooting for like college initially when I went into grad school. That's why I went to get my master's, because you need a master's to be able to teach higher ed and in high school level. Um, but I saw like my dad with woodworking, he did it because he loved making things. So he would go in and have access to the studio, and he would teach students how to do woodworking. But then when he wasn't teaching, he was in the wood shop making guitars or whatever. Like just he could make anything out of wood. So I was like, wow. So if you love doing something, it's a great practicing what you preach and teaching that thing that you love is a pretty cool way to make a living, like doing this. So my discipline was like working with cameras, essentially. Telling stories with cameras, screenwriting, movie producing was like my undergrad background. That's what I went to graduate school for. And with the idea of, oh, maybe I can be a professor of like filmmaking, which I'm not like tenured or anything, but I still teach a little bit for Emerson. And it's cool. It's cool. But I was mentioning earlier the flaws of higher ed. They're definitely there. I've gone through that. I've seen but I enjoy what I'm doing with them. I'm just, it's a different subset of students. But so that's how I kind of got into it, was seeing my parents doing it and out of grad school.
It's a very different sort of teaching. You mentioned jewelry making and woodworking versus critical thinking, right? And actually, if it's sort of ironic because I think maybe both are really missing from today, right? Like some of the probably most practical things that I learned were like, hey, how to change my brake pads in auto shop, right? Or just things that are practically applicable to real life. You could think of something so simple as budgeting, right? And it just doesn't seem like school is focused so much on teaching how to apply what you learn to the real life, and it's much more interested in teaching you about subjects. But then you were getting into to filmmaking, which is also very artistic. Like you come from a family of makers or builders, right? I can certainly appreciate that, and I love that, and I love teachers as well. But do you see it sort of the same way that I do, where we've drifted away from the practical aspects of teaching, and like, how do you feel about trade schools and things of that nature?
No, I think they're great. Like if I was going to do it again, if I could avoid student loans, I would. Though, I mean, with my discipline, I mean, I went into undergrad thinking, oh, I'm going to go make movies in Hollywood and stuff like that. I'm going to go that route. And I did that route. And, I lived in LA for like 3 years and worked at an agency. And I dipped my toe in that water, but I knew I learned I did not want to live in Hollywood or in LA. I wanted to be on the East Coast for sure. And then I was just kind of trying to find my way and like, how do I make a living with a camera? And then eventually I made it to grad school. That was all like in my mid 20s. But for me, what I was doing, dude, it was like in high school, falling into that, I was like teaching students how to work with a camera, essentially. Like I was kind of like a specialist teacher where it wasn't like a core curriculum. It's like, okay, we just want you to be the digital art teacher, essentially. So you're going to teach students how to do Photoshop, video editing, podcasts, like, but there was no curriculum or anything. I got off your question. I forgot what you.
No, just like more practical
Yeah,
learning
the practicality
and
of it. Yeah, that's right. Right, that's what it was. So it was like the way I view that is how do you have like this? Let's say you have like an hour with these students, this one group a week, right? And they rotate through. How do we take these tools like a camera, video editing software, 3D printing? We had that, but how do you use those tools like best prepare them to be the most effective and articulate adults that you can? And so there was some questioning when that viral video or whatever came out. People were like, why are you having conversations like this? Like my colleagues even like, why are you having conversations like this with students when you're supposed to be teaching them how to work with cameras? It's like, okay, well, what are we supposed to do with the camera? Like I'll teach, like they think I'm just supposed to be teaching them how to operate the camera and edit the video and everything. Okay, but we need footage to edit. And if I have this, that there's so much utility in what a student can do with a camera to teach them to get over public speaking fright, for example, without having to stand up in front of a room with 100 people. You might not have a room, but if you can learn to speak on camera and block that out of your mind, it can help them become more articulate. You can being able to view your footage back and hearing yourself talk allows you to get out the ums, the stutters, the blah blah blah, whatever, in a way that it's such a tool that's underutilized. And I kind of stumbled upon that a bit through luck. But if I'm supposed to be working with these students with this technology, I'm trying to figure out how to best apply this technology in the way that's going to most benefit those students. And yeah, there was a lot of fear around that well, not fear, but there was a lot of, I feel like, fear to innovate or allow a really remarkable opportunity where we suddenly had the ability to create things that actually reach people in a way that probably we would never be able to do again. We would never be able to do again. Those students will never have an opportunity like we had following that viral video. But it is what it is.
Yeah, that's actually a great line of questioning. What was the reaction in the classroom after that happened? How did the conversation change with the students?
It didn't change at all. It was like they were oblivious to it. It was weird. Yeah, I know. No one's going to believe that. Yeah.
Okay, you mentioned on the video that you recorded the day after you were laid off that they took your computer and that you had a book that you were working on and your crypto accounts open. Did you ever get a resolution for that? Did you get your book? And
yeah, I was able to eventually. I managed to hire a lawyer, and I thought on it for a while. I was like, is this really worth this retainer that I can't afford? But the whole thing was so strange. Seeing the lengths this individual was willing to go, it just felt, I was like, I just want to put this behind me. So I want to pay to have someone who help me walk through this, make sure that I'm not getting screwed over here because there's this document. She negotiated, she reached out, and they initially just doubled down. They're like, oh, well, we're not going to, they just denied everything. They're like, well, we're not going to, wouldn't, and they're never going to acknowledge ever doing anything wrong. That's just the way it is. But, and she was like, look, this document, this agreement you guys wrote up is like crazy. You know what, like, there's no way that he could sign this. And they actually doubled their offer, but it was still, I just didn't want, I didn't feel, it didn't feel right. And she was like, this is one of the, it's very rare that I advise a client to not take the money. She's like, she says, most of my clients feel like they want to hold off on the money as though it matters to be able to talk about, like, no one gives a crap. She's like, I usually advise them, take the money. Why do you need to talk about anything? Like, why? Just take the money. She's like, this is one of the few times where I would advise a client, like, do not sign this, do not take the money. If you could, if there's any way you could afford to pass on this. And it was a hit, but I feel so, it was the right move. I knew in my gut, I know in my soul that I just don't want anything to do with them.
So were you offered any help, like from lawyers or individuals in the community? I mean, it seems like this is like a front line on the battle for free speech, right? And I know myself and many other people, including Elon, are like really super interested in making sure that this goes the right way. I remember learning when I was in school the importance of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and especially the First and Second Amendment as it relates to our freedoms and, you know, what makes America great, right? Like what makes America the powerhouse country over the past couple centuries. Talk to me about free speech. Talk to me about, like, did the lawyer think that was it because of a low dollar amount, or did they just really think that what you had to say, your story, was really important?
No, it's because they would have given them control over my YouTube channel. It would have anything I do. I would have, and they could have taken that money back at any point for the rest of my life if they viewed somehow that if they perceived me ever saying a lie or saying anything that they perceived as damaging to them in any way. And it was a no-go, dude. It was like just not happening. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. But as far as, and that lawyer, she looked into everything. And so, yeah, she negotiated. Anyways, I didn't answer your question. After I got the lawyer, I think they were like, and I turned down their offer. I think they were like, oh, and they offered to give the data back if I would return some microphone that I didn't. This guy, like the guy that was in a lot of the videos that helped me grow this YouTube channel, my colleague that helped me, he was another teacher at that school. And after the viral video, we set up a studio in my house, and once a week we would record a video. And we did it with all our own personal equipment between him and me. And he was really into cameras and stuff as well. We'd always shared this passion about it with cameras and everything. And I thought it was his mic, and he came here one day. He's like, I need to come pick up my gear. And I knew the school was not going to let him do the YouTube channel anymore. And he came and got his gear, but he left the mic. And I was like, what do you want to do with the channel? He's like, I can't do it anymore. And I was like, you got a family to support. He's got a 3-year-old. Doesn't, I get it. Like, they could fire him at any time too. Like, this is, so he, no hard feelings. It hurt because he was my best friend too at that school. So I haven't seen him ever since. But he left his mic, and it turns out the school, they're claiming it belonged to them, even though I saw that identical mic in the classroom the day that I got fired. But it's just not worth, there's nothing you can do legally because it's the same. Anyways, so they were like, give us this mic back and blah, 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 and we'll give you the stuff on your memory stick, and which I appreciate. That was good. So I met the lawyer in a parking lot, and he gave me the book back on my data on a memory stick. Anyways, that was to answer that other question. Sorry, this other question you just asked me.
Like about the importance
speech.
of free speech. Yeah. And like, how do you personally feel about being able to speak about it?
I think a student should have the ability to consent for a project, or a parent should have the ability to give permission if the student and their parents want, and they're like, he doesn't appear on camera, his voice is in the video. Sure, post it on YouTube. If the parents and the students are okay with that, I don't understand why the school that seems like freedom anyways, but technically it's some technicality where they have jurisdiction, I guess. So technically that doesn't fall under freedom of speech. Though, anyways, so that's the realm that we are in, and that's the realm in which they operate. They're not stupid to the point where this individual has, she does. I was just telling you about the principal and the assistant principal that hired me were fired in a similar manner the year before. They do this all the time, and they always cover their bases legally, so they're not exposing themselves. They know exactly what they're doing. It's like clockwork, and so there's nothing you can really do. It's not like I can point to anything that's illegal. It's borderline. It's unethical for sure. So when a lawyer looks at it, that's the response. It's like, it's super unethical, but I'm not sure there's recourse here. And you asked about people reaching out. I was super, and I do want to thank Elon for I don't know if this was direct or if it was just a result of the X policy, right? I had people messaging me like, hey, Elon said he would provide legal support for anyone above. I was like, I don't even know how to reach Elon Musk. I'm not gonna, what do I do? I got an email from his legal team though, and they looked into it. And so I'm really thankful for that. I don't want to go into it too much. I don't know what to say, but you could probably read between the lines of what I've already said, that if there's anything, as far as me not revealing the name of the school, I never will. And the first and foremost reason for that is that it just morally, there's nothing, it doesn't do anyone any good. It just doesn't feel like the right thing to do. Yes, there's other things to consider about it. And I've put a lot of thought into it, and that's just the conclusion I came to. So regardless of what the legal situation is, I'm not going to do that. And this really has nothing to do with that. But anyway, so thank you, Elon, for it. And several people have offered just advice, and just, it's been nothing financial, but but just people like that makes a huge difference. Someone looking into something and being like, hey, if it's huge. So there have been people that have been there. Yeah.
You mentioned, the free speech technicality of sharing a student's voice in your classroom, but I'm more interested in like your ability to teach what you want, right? Innovate in the classroom, to speak about the problems that you had in the classroom publicly, right? I mean, that is more the free, like we can get into whether or not a student should be, allowed to be on a YouTube channel or not. That's like
There's
a whole
no
different
point
thing.
even.
But
Yeah.
I'm just talking like more generally, it does feel like it's a us versus them on the free speech issue. It feels like it's a global thing, and it feels like it's getting attacked from all over, right? So I'm curious if this is like something that you're passionate about. Is that a battle that you're interested in waging? Do you feel the same way that I do about that topic?
I do. Yes, I do. And I think that it's remarkable to see what is happening on X, and it's such a good thing to see someone like Elon take a stand with that, and people like you. And no, it's absolutely, it's essential. It's the cornerstone that allows everything else to flourish from there. It's our backbone. It's what will keep us. It's our system of checks and balances. It's absolutely essential. Yeah, there's always going to be freedom. Freedom of speech does not mean freedom from consequence, and I understand that. But no, it's paramount.
And like you mentioned that your supervisors were fired the year leading up to you being fired. Just your own speculation. Do you think that they were also sort of innovating in ways that the school district didn't like? Do you think that it's like a similar reason that they were removed?
I know why it was. It'll take me 5 minutes to answer that, but because it was a coup kind of thing, where, because at this school it's very unique, where the staff are a bit more high school than the students in this clicky way, because it's not like a regular public school. I'll just say that it's not a regular public. It's not my first year teaching. I was in a regular public school. I know what that's like. This is not that. It's a unique situation that so there was a political divide. There's two sets of leadership, and I got along great with the other ones. Like, I never had an issue. And the two, but anyways, these two are the two that hired me, interviewed me, and I worked for 2 years. And there was kind of a political split between these two, just kind of social cliques that kind of grew apart, and tensions grew and grew and grew, and eventually they were able to get to that one person who makes the decisions and get them removed in a day, and it caused several people left with them. And then that person who led that took his position, became the assistant principal, and this 28-year-old became the principal. He's like 8 years young. Yeah, I'm 27. I'm 37 right now. He might be 30 now. I'm pretty sure he was in his those 2 years. I think he was 28, and he became the principal. And anyways, but he was a fine guy. He was nice and everything. So there was just this, but that assistant principal, there was just it's just inner workplace politics, and
Was it
it exists.
politics? Do you think it was
Workplace
politics?
not like real politics, but workplace politics. It was a vie for like power within this little workplace, which who cares outside the school, but it was a power struggle. Yeah.
I think it was the rabbit hole that posted recently some data on party affiliation in higher education, and it was like, if my memory serves, in the high 90% that was liberal, and high 90s, like that's insane.
No,
Does it
yeah.
feel that way in high school as well?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, it feels like that. Maybe that just has something to do with the environment of like Massachusetts, where yeah, man, I remember I had a student, he graduated last year, but he was really intrigued with religious ideas and Jordan Peterson. And I remember him talking to me because he had no one else to really talk to about it. And there was this strange reaction from many of those. There's just like this one clique that I worked intensively with them for my first 2.5 years before I went building wide and got to work with the other set of leadership. And that was like a breath of fresh air. But at the time, this kid was like, it was just within this one subset, and it felt very like it was almost like they were suppressing the idea that it's okay to believe in God. Or I remember him talking to me directly about politics. And I remember having a conversation at one point, and I was just like, dude, you just got to understand that some people are so encapsulated with a mindset around these topics that you're never going to get through to them. They're not going to be open to dialogue. Don't let it get to you. It's not, I remember talking to him about that. I was like, just don't, some of these people like here, it's not going to even be worth trying. It's worth try and have dialogue with everyone. That's awesome. But the people that are just going to beat these things down, they're not going to be open. Don't let that get to you. Don't let that limit you, is what I was trying to encourage him. Because he was very intrigued with the religious ideas. I could tell it really deflated him a bit, that reaction. But
Yeah, when you word it like that, it almost feels like it's okay to innovate in a certain direction. Like, for example, pushing gender ideology in school, right? Which leads to conversations like the one that went viral. But if you try to innovate in the other way at all, or not even in the other way, but just like, I mean, to hear you talk about how some people are difficult or maybe impossible to reach, when what you went viral for was what I perceived as the closest thing possible to doing that, right? Like, you had a very intelligent conversation asking questions to someone who held a particular belief, with the intention of having them examine their own beliefs and understand even why they feel that way, making sure that they had made up their own mind rather than someone else making up their mind for them. I mean, to me, when I see that, I see hope, right? Like, that's what I want to see in the world. That's what my channel is all about. I'm like down to have conversations with anyone, no matter what issue you feel strongly about and what side you're on. I don't care if I agree with you or not. What I would love to do is help tell the story, help question where I think, maybe people are like, offer a little bit of pushback where I think they're jumping to conclusions, get further clarity on how they support some of their arguments. But I just really love the intention of trying to understand and also helping people understand themselves as a means to maybe get beyond this like really painful divide that we have right now. And I look to you as like someone who was a part of the system who could have potentially helped in that regard, and you got sort of like alienated and pushed out, and that doesn't feel promising or hopeful to me at all. How has your personal beliefs evolved since that conversation? Do you feel like it is more difficult to accomplish what it was that you were trying to do in that moment? Do you feel any sort of like, I'll just stop there. What do you think?
There's something special about even college students. I think I know there are crazy college students. We've seen them, but I was just on a campus with Peter Boghossian like last week doing some street epistemology, and there was some good conversations. They're not locked in. They haven't gone through adulthood to the point where they feel they don't have that social commitment and the pressures of what their neighbors think and things like that. There's still a willingness to a sincerity to following logic. And there was an interesting exchange last week with a student about J.K. Rowling, and this student was talking about how J.K. Rowling was anti-Semitic, though this guy, we asked, well, why do you think that? Same pattern. It's the exact same. I've heard it. Okay, but you just said that it's true. Well, you know how you sometimes just intuit, it's like, even though I don't know why, I can feel it, right? You see where this is going. But he was genuine. And by the end of it, I think he realized like, oh, I probably shouldn't have phrased it that. It was the same arc. So I would rather work with that. There's something pure about their intellectual like intentions at that age that you lose in adulthood.
So you think we really need to focus then on the youth, and that us grown-ups are either there or not, and sort of unmovable?
The future is absolutely in the youth, and it's most of these, if not all these problems, are to blame not on the kids, but the adults. They're the ones they're not in charge of what classes are offered and how the classes are offered and why the tuition is so high and why these loans are happening. And they are the future. As far as like my beliefs and everything around, I mean, I'm kind of shifting gears here, but I was going back to that kid asking about God and everything, and we had some really interesting conversations. He was a character. That had some interesting conversations though, but like throughout all this, it has solidified my belief in the idea that if I live I know it was a brilliant thing that Jordan Peterson said that has stuck with me, but if I live as though God exists, I do see a remarkable difference. And this has like in the midst of these tribulations, we'll call them, do I say something about the school? What do I do? But if I don't say this about the school, I had Fox News wants to do an interview. Oh, but you won't tell us the name of the school. Barry Weiss, the Free Press, set up an interview. Oh, well, I'm not going to tell you the name of the school. Okay, that's fine. They come to my house. Michael Moynihan sits in my frickin' living room and does the interview with me. Spend the entire afternoon talking to this dude. And then a week later, he emails me, hey, just on the down low, will you just tell me the name of the school for like my journalistic integrity? I was like, dude, I told you on the phone before you came to my house I wasn't going to do that. Now at the 11th hour, and I even told him the story about Fox News doing that at the 11th hour. And he's like, yeah, that sucks when they do that. That's a common tactic. And now you're doing it. So withholding something like that is not doing me any favors. But living as though God exists, I trust that and it seems to work. Like there's something bigger that. So, anyways,
I mean, I can relate to that to some extent, right? Like I'm not religious, but lately I've been thinking more that a lot of what's missing in culture is religion, right? Like we've taken that void and we've replaced it with other things. And I have a hard time personally believing any book that tells me that if I don't believe it, I go to hell, right? Like that, I have a disconnect
mm-hmm.
instantly. But,
Yeah,
but, but I believe that so many of the lessons from the Bible are like just really, really important. And we could use to learn a lot from the wisdom of the past right now. But I also feel like things are changing so quickly that it's almost like I feel a sense of urgency to solve these problems in a way where it's difficult to stomach the idea that the solution is to focus on the youth and wait for them to come in power, right? Like it feels like maybe that's too late, and we somehow need to inject some change and some hope into folks that are already grown and already indoctrinated. And that seems like, a super difficult thing to do, but also worthy. I mean, I posted today on X that it feels like we're building up to the final boss battle in an epic video game, right? And it's like one either like eternal darkness or eternal light after this battle is sort of what it feels like to me. I'd love to hear your response to that.
sorry, it froze for a minute there, but I'm sorry when you were doing the quote, it completely froze. I didn't hear it, but something about the eternal darkness of
Yeah, like
like
it feels like we're building up to the final boss battle in an epic video game,
it
right? Like
does a
there
bit.
is.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, yeah, it does. And I could, I think I know what you mean about that feeling. Yeah, and it's scary, man. It's like without getting into the election and leaning one way, but yeah, it is scary. I totally understand what you mean.
Why? I mean, why not? If you don't mind, let's get into politics. What do you think about the election? There are
I
no forbidden topics on this show.
I am I don't like thinking of myself as like conservative or Democrat or Republican. I would kind of go by whatever the time, point by point in the current time in which we are. And it's like I am concerned, very concerned with the assassination attempts, the rhetoric, the just blatant you take for granted. This is one thing this whole experience has taught me. Things that I take for granted as normal and just logic that seems so simple. Like I never would have thought that video would have, and had Elon Musk not tweet it, perhaps it wouldn't have gone, it probably wouldn't have gone like viral. It's not that interesting, but there are these exchanges have taught me and exchanges since on YouTube that seem like baseline intelligence people see as like something unusual. And so it's a bit scary. It's like, wait a minute, everybody should be able to do this. This is not like a unique thing. So when I'm hearing the debate and Kamala talking about the very fine people and just going these blatant lies, it's concerning. And so I am concerned about, like you said, it does feel in this way, this like a larger threat in some, I don't want to say it like that, but it does. I see what you mean by like the final boss. I don't know what's going to happen. I'll be honest.
I mean, for me, like definitely the assassination attempts play a huge role in that feeling, right? It's like this just really super escalated tension, but then there's so much going on in technology, the things happening in the Middle East that are like,
Yeah.
tangential, but like somewhat also unrelated from what's happening in our own politics. Um, it's wild, right? Like every generation leading up to now has always sort of said, these are the craziest times ever. These young kids are the devil, right? Wild. And it's easy to take away from that like we're all exaggerating and, everyone should just calm down.
Yeah.
But I think that it's also, maybe more likely that they were right every generation and that we are in more danger each time, and it is actually escalating each time. And we've, perhaps been lucky that the Cold War didn't go worse, or, all of these different things along the way. And it feels like as our technology gets more and more powerful, our weapons are more and more leveraged. It's like, I think that it's true what we're saying. And it feels to me like we really are on the precipice of, someone is going to take control of the entire planet, right? And you could say maybe America has done that for some period of time already, but not at the level that I'm talking about. So it does definitely feel like the boss battle. Like, this is really important. The stakes are extremely high.
I think I was thinking about that analogy, the boss bill. I think it's coming from the fact that I don't think we've ever had political division like this. There's never been. Yeah, there's never, and never. I never, as a kid, I grew up I mean, my parents were all. I never would have considered I would ever agree with anything potentially conservative. It was always like the Democrats are the good guys, but something has shifted. Like, I mean, that's a whole kind of, but I don't think in American history we've ever had. I don't think it's ever. World War II was not like this in the lead up to World War II. It wasn't. Vietnam, I don't even think it was different in Vietnam. I believe there was a counterculture movement, but the counterculture has flipped, and now it's like pushing for traditional values, and so is the counterculture. It's strange. So,
right, it does seem like pushing for traditional values is almost like the today's version of being punk rock, right? Yeah. It's like it does seem maybe necessary. Let's talk about the left changing, though, because I think that is an interesting topic. I have voted in every presidential election since the late 90s for the Democratic Party. I have always considered myself a socially liberal person, and maybe like fiscally conservative, right? It's a cliche, especially with people in California. But that's how I was, define myself, right? But what I see now coming from the left is not compassion, right? It's more like well, it's more vitriol than compassion, right? It's like, instead of loving someone, it's hating someone for not loving someone. I don't even know how to describe it exactly. But I am like, it feels very anti-freedom. I think that's the best way for me to sum it up, right? Like, it feels like the left is attacking freedom of speech. It feels like the left is attacking our right to bear arms. I've always held individual liberty and the Constitution as something that was super important, regardless of where my political ideologies lied otherwise. But now it feels like the left is just like ready to completely abandon that. And to me, that makes my heart bleed. Also anti-merit, right? It's like all these attacks on billionaires. Like, I understand that there is a large wealth disparity, but it doesn't feel to me like attacking our most productive citizens in the United States, as we're falling behind in manufacturing and, all of these other things in this global competition, that we alienate our best business leaders, right? Like, for example, the attacks on Elon, from my point of view, have been appalling, right? Like, if we don't have SpaceX, we're in a much worse national security position than we are right now. Like, we dominate satellites in space, and that is definitely something that you want, right? Like, in this technological age, if we didn't dominate space, like, we're in a much, much worse position than we are now. And the same thing goes with manufacturing, right? That is just one example of a billionaire, but you see, especially from California politicians, I've seen a lot of it from Kamala Harris, like, it's time that billionaires pay their fair share. And it's like, the top 1% pays 50% of taxes already. So they're already paying 50 times their quote unquote fair share, right? Like, how far is it supposed to go? Talk to me about that.
I've had multiple debates recently people on the left that tie themselves into a pretzel trying to explain why Elon Musk is bad at business and things like that. Like that's literally the argument they're putting forward. Like, okay, let's go to space travel. Did Elon save space travel? And they're going to go and explain that, and then why Tesla's not a good brand. And it's just like, because of this larger political story, there is a, and that's what I was referring to. And I was saying, like, these baseline principles that seem like they should be so simple. I was listening to just earlier today, Bill Maher with Jordan Peterson, and this was the thing that exactly what you were saying, Jordan Peterson was trying to articulate, which should be so straightforward, that just because some people have more money, everyone should still be treated equally under the law. Yes, a $1,000 speeding ticket is going to hit you harder if you make $50,000 versus a larger amount of income, obviously. But do we give speeding tickets differently based upon that point? And it ties into the idea of equity, and Bill Maher's sitting there talking about, well, I do want, and even Bill Maher, who acts like and in many areas he is more reasonable, but he still believes equality of outcome is the goal. And it just boggles my mind that people cannot connect these dots, which are deeper than politics. It goes to the very foundation of like reality.
It seems so simple to me that when you're talking about equality, the only way to address it is by lifting someone up. If you ever have to chop someone down at all, right, then you've lost your way. And it seems like that is the approach. It seems like the expectation is that those who are doing really well, who are either, successful via luck or hard work or whatever, that they are responsible for the people who aren't successful. And I want to help everyone. I want everyone to succeed. But the idea that before I feed myself, I'm responsible for someone else, right? It's like, let me take care of putting on my own oxygen mask in the airplane, even before I put it on my kids, right? Like, they tell you that when you're boarding the plane, and it is common sense, right? Because if you don't save yourself, then you can't save someone else. But it's like that meme where the three different height people are staring over the fence at the baseball game, and at first they're all on equal level boxes, and like the kid can see over the fence and whatever, but then eventually they chop off the tall person's legs so that they all have exactly the same view. And I just don't understand how harming our most able people helps anyone, right? Like, we depend on those folks to innovate. We depend on those folks to bring jobs and all of these other things. And what we're going to do is cap their ability to succeed.
Yeah. People get caught up in that story, because I do believe that we make sense of the world through stories, and it's a compelling story with the noble intentions that I can understand wanting. Well, who doesn't want the world to be more fair? But you're right when you were talking about, like, if you have to tear someone down, that's very different than lifting someone up or helping people. Like, to me, it goes to these first principles. Like, you can apply this with like racism. What is racism? This whole conversation on this new definition is just treating people differently based on the color of their skin, which goes to what we were just talking about, treating everyone the same under the law. And we should strive for that when it comes to race. And if you see yourself crossing that line, don't do it. It's as simple as that. So, are we going to change test scores for a certain race to get into college? That's treating people differently based upon race. Don't do it. Just apply that first principle. Don't do it. If you cross that line, we should make it. There are certain lines that we will not cross for any reason, because they're slippery slopes, and that wisdom seems to have dissipated.
I think it's interesting that slippery slope, it's like it's considered a fallacy, but I definitely am watching it play out in culture and in politics, so many different issues that I actually agreed with the initial progress, right? Like, from my point of view, gay marriage is good, right? Like, treat them no differently than anyone else. What like, that's great. But as soon as it you keep pushing that, and you start adding a lot more letters to gay rights, and now it's like, okay, we are putting men who identify as women in competitive sports against women. It feels like the slippery slope actually played out, right? And the things that when Obama was president, the right was like, this is bad, this is going to lead to degeneracy and all of those other things. And I'm sitting here, as someone who doesn't identify as part of either particular party, thinking like, whatever, like this is good, right? And now it seems like some of the things that they were afraid of actually have played out.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good example. No, I get you. And yeah, I know there's conversations around all those topics. I kind of tend towards the libertarian view, or the whatever the view is, but we're just like live and let live. If it's not crossing any of those first principles, like what's important, this is another one. If what's important to one person cannot override or be imposed upon what's important to someone else. So yeah, I might have my views on spirituality, God, whatnot, but I'm not going to impose that upon someone else's religion, freedom to religion. And in my view, going back to that example with that student, that's kind of a line that was being blurred. They were imposing what was important to them, whether it was no belief in God. That is now crossing that line. So yeah. Anyways, yeah, just don't cross the lines.
Back to stories, because I think stories are like super important. I think at scale, that's the way that we teach humans what is acceptable behavior, right? And to think ahead, like what the ramifications of their actions could be. Stories in the past were collected by the philosophers of their time, and stored in books, or whether it's the Bible or something completely different, right? Laws, things like that. It seems now that the way that stories are collected and distributed is mostly by algorithms, and those algorithms tend to favor outrageous things, right? Like you mentioned, your story, as outrageous as it is to me, probably would not have gone viral if free speech and the particular issue that you were talking about were not something that was near and dear to Elon, who has a gigantic reach himself and the ability to amplify something like that, right? So instead of getting a great book that teaches our youth and putting them, every Sunday in a church, and them hearing stories about how to be a good human, instead, we're getting bombarded by these clickbaity headlines, and whatever story spikes either your adrenaline or, whatever else it is, as opposed to what's going to teach us a valuable lesson. Like, what do you think about how we should attack that specific problem going forward?
Yeah, like the problem of stories.
Distributing the right stories, I think. I mean, to me, it's like stories are so important to humans, but we are being fed short form, whether it's like TikTok or YouTube shorts, or wherever people are getting their like 1 minute videos, or sensational things that are just like going to get the most clicks, anger the most people, that do the most comments and reposts, and that, eventually it turns into this huge story, right? Hundreds of thousands or millions of impressions. And then someone can post, something that's very relevant to like something, a problem that we have culturally or whatever. And it's like, no one even sees it. So I'm just curious, like, what would you do about solving that problem?
I would go with the least bad option. There's no good option. What's the one with the least? There's going to be flaws with this, like you're pointing out. But what's the alternative? What adjustments are we going to make? And to make an adjustment, logically, you're going to then be tipping the scales. Unless you were going to strive for a system. I'm not an expert on algorithms, how algorithms would fit into this. But if you were going to go as hands off as possible, there's going to be sensationalism. It's going to be a reflection of like human nature. You know what I mean? It's going to, but that's what we should be striving for with freedom of speech, is that if you want to post stupid stories, there's going to be the Wild West. There's going to be all that nonsense. But the moment that we come in and we say we have the right stories, we're now putting our finger on the scale. And that's not a power. I don't think anyone should. And you could make an argument perhaps that the algorithm is doing this. I'm not sure, but I would strive for a system where there's no tipping of the scales and you trust that quality stories and truth, and there's something about that elusive intangible, the hero's journey, that there's something within the stories that are worth hearing that will rise to the surface as they always have through the noise, and that will become timeless and resonate with the human spirit in a way that nothing else can, and there's no way for us to explain why. But that seems to be the least bad option.
I definitely don't like the idea of humans curating the stories. What I'm open to is different inputs in the algorithm, right? Like right now, it's based on most interactions. That's like just generally speaking what is going to push something in the algorithm, right? And if you think about human nature and you're building a system, you should already know about humans that we're going to interact the most with the most sensational things, right? So what I would love to do is design a system focused on gathering whatever information that it needs to from the individual consuming it, whatever input that is. And I don't even know what it would be, right? Like, I think perhaps time on content might be better, but then again, that has its own problems. But like some way of gathering information about the value of the content instead of just the interactions with the content, because I think that the interactions are just too closely tied to sensationalism. And again, and I am very much a free speech advocate, and I completely agree that tipping the scale is wrong. But I think that the scale exists already in such a way that there are factors that influence it, and it's just like, how do we choose the right factors for that? Do you have any ideas about like how that could be measured or anything like that?
I'm not sure it would be possible. I mean, maybe it is, but beyond what I was just saying, I don't. I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. I think whatever would be the most reflective of how we actually feel. Ideally, it's like, well, what interests me the most is what I'm seeing pop up, and however the algorithm is able to judge my interest, whether it's duration on content or I guess in this other scenario they're using click numbers, but I don't know.
It's definitely a difficult problem to solve, or they would have already solved it for sure. Yeah. I think like if I'm looking for a metric that's most important to me, forget about the algorithm, but just in general for solving this problem, a good way to look at it is, how effective, Warren, do you feel like you are able to be right now? You've been removed from the school system that you're a part of, but you're doing something new now. It sounds like you're teaching anyway. Are you reaching more students now than you were before? Do you feel like you are able to like have an impact?
It's interesting. I'm still teaching a class at Emerson College. Just an online class, but it's fun. I really enjoy that. But if I think about, potentially you could look at YouTube in that way. That's why I initially started posting, teaching, and recording lectures my first year at that public school, because I'd seen Jordan Peterson do it. I was like, that's really cool. You can reach more students here. It was just interesting. So between that and doing like filmmaking content and things, but maybe you could view what I'm doing now, I guess, as potentially teaching. Some people leave comments talking about it in that way. Sometimes I feel like I'm being a bit tacky with it, and I'm not. I wish that I could treat it like more academically long form. What I'm doing is very like 8-minute. It's highly cut because I'm depending upon that ad revenue to pay the bills. So I need it to hit, which does compromise. It kind of goes to what you're describing with like the algorithm. I am kind of subservient to the algorithm right now, and I don't like that, but it is what it is. I hope that changes. I hope it changes, but
It won't change if we just keep measuring, the inputs to the algorithm the same way. It definitely won't
Yeah,
change.
you're right. You're right. I just don't have the solution for it. I don't know what better solution
Well,
we
like
could do than X.
what you're forced to do is give a hook, right? I mean, like you definitely cannot get traction
No, you're
on
right.
this app without a hook. But I
Oh
think
yeah.
if you tell the story correctly after that, like there is still the potential for long form to do really well.
Oh yeah.
I did a 4 hour interview just a couple days ago, and my retention was insane,
Oh
Warren.
yeah.
It
No,
was like 45% made it through the entire video. Like
yeah,
that's
no, that's awesome.
insane.
That's huge. And like Joe Rogan, like, look, no, it's possible. I'm just talking very specifically about me, like in my audience and what I have to work with, and just trying to make enough ad rep to pay the bills, because it's literally what I'm depending on.
Me too.
So it, uh, and I'm trying to grow in that direction more and more because it's very dependent upon there's all this pressure. Picking the right topic is the thing that's going to factor the most because that's the title and the thumbnail and whether they're going to click or not. Like I just did a video on Winston Churchill and like the Tucker Carlson and Winston Churchill debate with that historian. They were not historian, whatever. And like to give you my perspective on that, and no one cares about that because it's like World War II and everything. I really like that stuff. It's just the topic. And then I post one today and I got like 200,000. It's like, whatever. Yeah, it's just but I recognize what you're saying, dude. Put long form has potential. I just need to get myself to that point. I'm just locked into this like build, make it work because it's all depending on, yeah.
The hope is that eventually you reach that exit velocity and you can spend more time on each piece of content because you're not as dependent on every single one hitting super hard. Is that how you're
Yeah, for
feeling about
sure.
it?
Yeah, then you can take more risks and cover things and you're not be like, I don't care if people find this interesting. That's how I used to do it. I didn't because I was making money as a teacher. And it's more fun. The content wasn't getting the numbers it was getting now, but it's just like Sam Richards, SOC 119. I got to meet him and we did office hours together and he's recording his live streaming his classes and they do very well, but I was just in awe of the purity of it. He doesn't care. He doesn't even monetize because he's making his money as a tenured professor and he just live streams his classes. And there's something that's pure about that. And that actually attracts people because there is something very intriguing about that and unique. We're already oversaturated with YouTubers. And when I go in there and I'm like picking a topic and I'm editing and everything, it's just the reality I'm in right now. I would like to get to the point where even like with what people like Destiny do, where they're just long form, just hanging out on Discord and exploring topics and in depth. That's a long form, and he's able to get crazy numbers. You just got to build to it, I guess.
Talk to me about Destiny.
It was interesting. Yeah, no, I had the chance to like do a stream with him for like 6 hours, and I disagree with him on a lot, but I was pleasantly surprised is how I would articulate it. Yeah, it was not what I expected. And maybe he was just putting on maybe, I don't know, maybe it was just the moment. But 6 hours, it seems like it's hard to hold a facade for that long. And I walked away from it being like, I disagree with him heavily. And I think that what he said in the wake of the assassination attempt, yeah, that was awful. And I don't retract or feel differently about what I said about that. But I liked him. I liked him.
That's the beauty of talking to people, I think, right? They become human at that point. Having these long form conversations is really, really super important. I think that, like, for example, I told you about that 4 hour interview that I did. And if you watch the entire conversation, I think the takeaway is entirely different than if you watch highlight clips, right? Like people took highlight clips from that video and posted them and they went massively viral, right? But the message that you get from those clips, from my point of view, was pretty dark because it looks like a battle between ideologies, right? But we spent 90 minutes leading up to that acting like friends, and people skip right past that whole part, and they get to the ugly ideology
Oh,
battle. But after the fact, I can look at that guess and think like they're a human, and despite us disagreeing or me even thinking that they're being like hyperbolic on some of their points that are like, maybe even dangerous to do, right? I got tons of hate in my comments as a result of that discussion. But regardless, because I spent 4 hours with this person, I view them as a person, not the
yeah.
enemy.
And I would say this, I would say people make mistakes in the same. So that whole stream with Destiny on that day was about January 6th, which I think was a big mistake. I think, honestly, this is just my opinion, factoring in different things. I think that if you could have a time machine, Trump would go back and probably make some adjustments because he has put himself, he's given the other side ammunition and he's put himself in a more difficult political position that he could have otherwise not done. I think Destiny would never admit it in the same way that Trump would never admit it. But Destiny probably go back in a time machine and perhaps say some different things
Do you
on
think
Pierce
he would?
Morgan
It
and
felt to
whatnot.
me like he was doubling down recently.
Maybe I'm wrong. I don't follow him that closely, but some people had, yeah, just from my interaction with them and seeing some adjustments he made in the wake of that, I think that it did burn some bridges, but he is he has a brand, and I could be completely wrong. There was a doubling down component. There's always going to be that, though, in the same way Trump has doubled down, though I still think Trump would go back in a time machine because publicly there's just, so I have no logical evidence for what I'm saying. This is just that, which I should never talk about, this subjective, my instincts. There's nothing to back it up, but between
I
you
don't
and me.
think that means you shouldn't talk about it. I think that one of the biggest problems we have is that people are afraid to talk about things, especially, I mean, like, there is an argument to be made that you shouldn't talk about something if you don't have evidence, maybe, right? You could mislead people or whatever. But I think a bigger problem than too many people talking about a subject is like we have this idea that certain subjects are taboo. And if you talk about them, like you can get fired from your job. And to me, what that leads to is like people living in a fantasy world where they think that because the only narrative that they heard is from a certain direction, that it must absolutely be the truth. But it's only because the counter narrative was so taboo that like those who held it had to keep it to themselves. So my attitude is like, if you have an opinion, it's in the best interest of everyone to share it.
Yeah, you're probably right.
I mean, like, when it comes to misinformation, do you think that that's potentially more damaging?
Um, as opposed to,
Well, like the alternative from my point of view is like you either talk about too much or too little, right?
no, no, you're right. No, it's your gut. There is something remarkable about our instinct. Is one of the reasons I believe in some form of higher power. There are things we cannot explain, and your instinct is one of them. You get vibes from people. And yeah, I can't provide any logical evidence for some things, but your gut is a powerful tool for sure.
Sometimes it feels like we have additional senses that even we are unaware of, right? And we're
Yeah,
picking up on signals that are not well understood to us. It definitely feels that way at
yeah,
times.
I agree.
So you mentioned that you feel like the shorter format is more gimmicky and less educational. Does that mean like do you feel unfulfilled then from
No, no,
an education perspective
I
or
shouldn't
like
say it like that because there's potential for a lot of, if let's say I were able to do that Winston Churchill video in a better way that resonated, if I could communicate to some people in 8 minutes something worthwhile, that'd be awesome. So I shouldn't put it that way. And I feel more fulfilled than at any point in my life. I love what I'm doing right now. It's scary because there's so little certainty. But no, man, I feel more alive than ever before. And I don't regret anything. That's the beauty of like living as though God exists. Like you're taking into account these decisions. There's just,
where does the uncertainty come from?
how am I going to pay for just financial.
It's
That's
mostly
it.
money.
Yeah, it's just all money.
Yeah.
Uh,
What about options? Like, do you feel pretty certain in the direction that you're headed? Are you considering different paths that you could take?
Oh, I'm always considering like different paths and what would be the smartest thing, but just keep going. Uh, yeah, just keep going and just
What's your
trying to
message
grow.
for the world, Warren? Like, what do you want to teach? I mean, like, forget about an individual lesson, right? Like the Churchill
Yeah.
lesson, for example. But like, what is your message? What is your mission?
How to develop a mind of your own.
So critical thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was kind of slapped on me, but that the critical thinking component it was but it does connect with my whole life of like even in film school I was always thinking why do we do it this way, why do we have to, what's the point of unions, like why do we why do I have to have lunch at 6 hours in, it's like anyway whatever it is, so
The whys are
always
so
ask
important.
why. Yeah, it's just always ask why and don't be afraid to ask why and think for yourself. So there's some that's what I striving to do.
So perhaps like the most frightening of all conspiracy theories is that the global elites are intentionally suppressing the why. Like they want to program us to think a certain way. They want to set the narrative from A to Z. And even the education system from the ground up is designed intentionally to create more of like corporate zombies than people who have a mind of their own. Does it feel like there's truth to that?
I could see how you would be open to that possibility for sure. For sure. Like there's definitely, I don't know what, this is a larger conversation, but I don't know with like the global elites, how do we quantify that and everything? But there's absolutely, Biden being pulled out, being replaced. There's a machine, a political machine, objectively, where it ends. There's so I understand what you mean by that. I'm not one of the people that are going to nitpick that and oh you're a conspirator. Like I understand people's concerns. People have various interpretations of those words. When you talk about global elites, like people can run with that in different directions. I'm not going to stick my nose up at someone for being skeptical of that. There's good reason to be skeptical of it.
Yeah, I think defining global elites is like it's maybe even misleading, right? Because it's probably not like some small tight knit group of
Right. Like
people,
by
but
definition, it should be impossible.
right, right. And it's like contradictory to my earlier statement that like we need to not be attacking the billionaires, right? Because who knows who is behind whatever is happening, but it certainly feels like we should be encouraging people to think more for themselves. And like, I'm not seeing it, right? Like to me, your story is like so super important. It really highlights what I think are the most pressing problems of our day. And to the extent that I can highlight, people like you and promote people like you. And like, I would love if when I asked you if you're reaching and affecting and teaching more people, that your answer was like, absolutely, this has provided me a platform. And now when I post a video on YouTube, hundreds of thousands of people see it, or at least tens of thousands of people see it or whatever. And as a result of that, um, you are getting more leverage and you're feeling better about what the future looks like.
You're right. That is true. That is true. So you're right. That should have been my response. It is. It is cool.
Do you really feel that way? You feel like you're
Yeah.
you're reaching many more
No.
people now?
Oh yeah. As far as like reaching people, yeah. And I was kind of probably overthinking the teaching vocab. The word teaching, but reaching people, yeah. So that's why it's a more exciting time than I've ever had in my life. I'm more satisfied than ever before because of that.
Is
For
reaching
sure.
different than teaching for you?
Perhaps not. That's you might be right about that. Yeah.
How do you feel about the inability to interact with the people who you reach now versus having a back and forth with that student in the classroom? Have you had interactions with viewers or whatever where they talked about how impactful it was? And do you feel like it compares in any way to what you may have experienced with, for example, that religious student that you had, or the individual, in the conversation?
I've learned a lot about I was so naive about online technology. I didn't even really know much about Discord. I'd used it like one time before all this, even till a few months ago, like beginning of the summer. And we've launched a Discord server. And so it is cool to see that grow. And people, if someone disagrees with something in one of my videos, they can come discuss it with me. Like for real, like on Discord. And we've done that many times. So that's a lot of fun. That's really cool. And I was pretty naive about how cool that technology was. So I think it's really cool having all of this technology. So there's so much potential in it. So that, yes, there is that. It's different than in person. But hey, like last week I got to go do street epistemology with Peter Boghossian at Williams College. And that's in person. So it has led me to meet really remarkable people as well.
What are you really excited about coming up?
It's the unknown with everything that is going on. There's not a specific event at the moment, but the possibilities are what I'm excited about. And maybe that's a cop-out answer, but there's so much cool potential.
Are you as anxious about the election as I am?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I feel like I'm definitely sitting on the edge of my seat waiting to see how this turns out.
I haven't spoken to anybody about that, but yeah, man, it's crazy.
Yeah. Okay, so Warren, how do people support you? What should listeners that make it this far into the interview do to help you out?
Best way to support would be like on Patreon if you want. I've been building out like exclusive content to try and to offer something to people that do want to support. It's like full debates, longer versions of all the YouTube episodes and behind the scenes stuff. There's, the standard Patreon format, and that would be probably the best place to do that. But
all right, one more question before we go. How are you spending your days now? Is it like mostly filming and editing videos, or you mentioned the Discord and interacting with folks that have consumed your content? What does your day look like now, Warren?
It's a balance of that and family, where I have like my girlfriend lives with me now with a 3-year-old, and they just moved in. Yeah, which is cool. They just moved in like for real like a month ago. So it's been a big, I went from like bachelor to a 3-year-old and doing YouTube and trying to find time to so it's been interesting, but that's what my days look like, balancing all those things.
I have 3 daughters, so I balance taking them to and from school and gymnastics and dance and recording these videos and editing these videos. And I spend a lot of time also interacting with people who comment on my things on X. It's like nonstop from the minute I wake up till the minute I go to sleep.
And you're killing it. It's awesome.
Well, I got a lot more that I need to do before I reach my goals, but I'm super happy with how things have been going. The past 2 years has been just a completely wild ride for me. So
that's really cool. We'll keep it up. That's really cool.
Thanks, Warren. I definitely appreciate you coming on the show, and best of luck with everything you're doing. If someone wants to learn from the research and the work that you're doing, is YouTube where you post all your videos? Do you also post them on X? Like, where do people find your content?
If I feel like it's a good enough video, I'll post it on X. Not all of them go to X. But you can always message me. Just join the Discord server. Message me directly if you want to speak or just set up a meeting or something. Or if you are interested in scheduling a session or something to research or discuss something, we can do that. Yeah, it's not hard to get in touch with people nowadays. So
yeah, I'm blown away with who I've been able to get in touch with, right? Like when I joined the platform, my intention was to try to get in touch with untouchable people, but the way that it's turned out has been so much more successful than I ever could have imagined in a million years. The tools that we have now to network are just absolutely incredible. The fact that me and all of my followers can learn from you, despite the fact that you're on the other side of the country, and it's going to be in like high definition video and audio. I remember when I was a teenager and I had a long distance girlfriend, and I had like $500 phone bills just to talk to her, right? So like there was no such thing as video chat yet then, and it's amazing how far it's come. So yeah, definitely grateful for that. Had you gone through this same scenario back 20 years ago, you would have had a lot fewer tools.
Yeah, it wouldn't have happened 20 years ago, probably.
Well, that's probably true. I guess you wouldn't have been posting on YouTube, which is, you know, the excuse that they had to get you out of there, from my understanding. All right. Well, thanks, Ward. I'll let you get back to your day.
No problem. Anytime. And yeah, I'd be happy. If I can ever do anything to help with what you're doing, just let me know.
Yeah, and right back at you if you ever want you know, my voice on something that you're doing. Let me know. I'd love to help out.
Awesome.
Right on, Warren. Have a good one.
You too.
Thank you. I hope you appreciated this podcast. If you liked it, consider following and subscribing on X and YouTube. Love you. See you again next time.